My older sister wanted to be an artist, and she wasn't a very good student, so they let her be an artist. And I was a very good student, so I was told that I should be a school teacher so that I could teach others and make money. Just sort of sepia-like paintings using the colors. And then he showed us how to make it opaque with more paint and transparent with more water.
Could you hold it up for just a sec?
Pardon me?
Could you hold it up?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we all, well, there's another thing that I want to say. When he said all you have to do is practice, there were 6 of us in the class. And I painted every day, and after that class, for many years. And after I got home, or I should say after I got back to the next class, of the 6 of us, there was one other woman who had painted every day. She and I both had paintings. The other 4 never practiced. And to the best of my knowledge, none of them ever painted again after that class. And she and I eventually became friends with a group called the Brown Baggers. You remember the Brown Baggers? There were 7 of us, and we stayed together for 30 years painting outdoors and doing shows. We practiced. Okay. So, to continue, you know, let's see, Tedkowski, okay, Ralph Krieger. All right, Homer Hacker. We all know Homer Hacker. He was a very fine painter. He was a good teacher, a wonderful demonstrator, but he was very domineering in a class, and I had a little problem with that. One of the things that I had
especially to women.
I'm sorry. Oh, yes, especially to women, and this is coming from a man. Yeah. Yes. Well, but they were all like that, Leonard. All the men were like that. Not you. Not you. No, you were the. No. It's really true because I met him at a show. I met him at a show at Sinclair, and he was so friendly. I was a male artist being friendly to little old me, you know. But this was the middle. The time that I was learning was the middle of what do they call that now? It was the women's. The feminine mystique. The feminine mystique. You know, where they show the woman in high heels vacuuming. So if you wanted to have the right kind of woman, you did housework and you got dressed up and you presented your husband with his martini when he got home, and raised his feet so he could rest them on the little cushion and all that kind of stuff. And this was real. This was real. Young women today don't have a clue that ever existed, but this was, what on earth was women's lib all about? What did that have to do with anything? Well, that's what it was all about. And it was very strong. And I'm sure, Sharon, you experienced some of this because you were in the workplace with male artists, and there was,
The salaries were not equal, that's for sure.
So anyway, I had never been exposed to that before. My father had 3 girls. He said, my girls can do anything a boy can do. We were taught that. That was part of our mantra. And if boy tried to bully us, my daddy says, I can do anything a boy can do. So anyway, however, Homer introduced me to 20 new colors, and Ralph would only let us use 3. You don't need 3. That's good enough. It was good enough. Well, his whole idea was to make it easier, really. Master this. Just master this. You can do anything with these 3 colors. I couldn't get the color of pumpkins. I couldn't get a good orange. That was really bugging me. But he said, don't waste your time on that. And God love him, when I started doing my color studies and doing my charts, and my students would still go back to him and say, we did this chart in Nita's class. Well, she's still doing them charts, he said. Well, I don't, he never, ever said a cruel word to me. He was always very supportive, but he had a weird sense of humor. And I could take it. I knew that he was not trying to diminish me in any way, and he did encourage me. And when I had an opportunity to teach, the first time somebody asked me, I'd only been painting a year and a half. So I went to Ralph and I said, do you think I can teach this? Well, you know more than they do.
Yeah.
So I kept that ahead of me. As long as I don't try to teach somebody that already knows more than I do, I'll be fine. So I made myself an expert in color, and not too many people know what I know about color. I can still do that. Okay, but he had great demos, I will say that. He had great demos, and he became a friend. My husband loved his artwork. We bought several of his paintings, and they had places of honor in my home, which I took from Roger Middleswart. Now, Roger Middleswart, this is the chart that I did in his class. This was the first time anybody broke down color like this for me. And Ralph didn't show us all this at once. You know, we started with the black and white, and then we got into the color. And we didn't bother with the black and white. But this is how Roger showed us to do the values. But then this is how he laid out the color wheel. And so as I did begin in my color studies, I realized that these, not everybody laid the color wheel out the same way. And so I like this because this is the one that I started with, and then I found that this seemed to be one of the more dominant ones. There are many different ways to make color wheels. There's no abiding law about how a color wheel should be. But you will see some books that will say it has to be in a certain way, you know, and no other way. But the problem that I had with him was we had to copy his paintings. And we would have to watch him draw, and then we would have to draw, and then we would have to watch him paint, and then we would have to paint what he painted in exactly the same way. And then he would do a critique, and he was very unkind. He made fun of our work. A funny looking tree. What's that supposed to be? Is that supposed to be that sort of thing? And I don't forgive that from any teacher that I ever had when they demeaned the work of the students when they did critique. And there were more than a few. I took more than 100 workshops. I finally stopped counting. But they were mostly watercolor. I also took collage and design and some drawing. But I got serious about color when I found a book at the library sale called Enjoyment and Use of Color. And it had only black and white illustrations and all text, very few illustrations. But I am a reader, and so I appreciate the written word, and that I didn't mind that it didn't have pretty pictures for me to look at because I was processing the information. Then I had a chance to take a class from the artist Jean Dobie. How many of you know Jean Dobie? Has anyone taken Jean Dobie's workshop? Oh, Christopher Schenck, WOW sponsored it. This was way, way back in the early days. She's written a wonderful book on color, and she had a color theory that she had learned from Edgar Whitney. Edgar Whitney is another one of my heroes. But after I started specializing and studying color, I started teaching color workshops at Riverbend, and I had, because of that, I decided to buy a computer and outline my classes for the Riverbend color workshop, and that's when I printed out my workshop, I knew I had a book. It just said, this is a book. And so that was 1985. It was published in 1985. It's still in print in its fourth version. And after Northlight, my publisher, they published 5 of my books. And they went into bankruptcy in 2018. And I thought I was done for, and Pelican Publishers bought my books. and now they sell them, and they're selling almost as well as they did for Northlight. So I think they'll be around for a while. All four of my books, I had four distinctly different titles, but each one of them was updated and upgraded several times, and they're all still in print. Okay, so anyway, when we went to get the computer, I was talking about how the feminine mystique worked. This is called The Computer Guy. A harsh wind drifted light snow over the road as Bob drove me to the computer store. From the look of the parking lot, Saturday was date night. He parked on the perimeter of the crowded lot and offered his arm to prevent my sliding on icy patches. Hot air blasted us as we walked into the maelstrom inside to buy my first computer. I knew what I had come for. We roamed the aisles searching for my portable computer. The young man approached us with a wide grin. He shook my husband's hand. "I'm Justin. How can I help you, sir?" "I want to buy a computer," I chirped. The salesman glanced at me and turned to Bob. "How much RAM do you need, sir?" Bob raised his eyebrows and looked at me. He knew less than I did about computers. I leaned toward Justin. 64K, I murmured. The salesman winked at me. "What software do you require, sir? Database? Spreadsheet?" I got the picture. What could a stupid middle-aged woman know about computers? I clenched my teeth. Word processing. Justin ignored me as he bounced on the balls of his feet. "I recommend WordStar for document processing, plus database and spreadsheet software for maximum productivity. The new PCs aren't in stock, but I can take your order." The IBM PC hadn't come out yet. That's how far ahead of it I was. The salesman pinned his squirrely eyes on my reticent husband, leaning against the counter with an inscrutable look on his face. My eyes narrowed. I advanced into Justin's personal space, my arms akimbo. "I want to buy a K-Pro computer and an Apple printer," I hissed. Justin stared at me, pop-eyed. He backed away. He turned to Bob. Good choice, sir. We have two in stock." He hustled off to the stockroom. Bob smiled at me and shrugged. Justin returned with 3 boxes stacked on a hand truck and eyeballed Bob, who didn't produce a wallet. I handed the salesman my business credit card, and he noticed my husband's name on the card. Women couldn't have their names on credit cards in that time. But he ignored my authorized signature. "You're buying a fine machine, Robert. Portable won't take up space on your desktop." He tendered the invoice for Bob's signature. I snatched the sales slip and signed it. Without missing a beat, Justin blathered on, still selling my husband my computer. The clueless computer guy rolled the hand truck outside and helped Bob load the equipment in the trunk of our car. He shook Bob's hand and smirked at me. "You're going to love putting your recipes on your husband's computer, Mrs. Leland." I had to escape before I committed mayhem. Bob caught my arm and urged me into the passenger seat. He literally removed me to the car. We drove home in silence, but by the time we arrived at our house, I'd nearly forgotten the computer guy. I could hardly wait to play with my new computer. So that was what we were up against. Okay, so now I have some things to show you in the way of exhibits. You've seen in the color wheel. So what I'm going to say is that if you're stuck, if you're learning, you consider yourself still a student or at an intermediate level, then you probably have some homework to do. And I really urge you to do it, because I feel that I've seen in my classes, I see great improvement over students when they kind of step back from their painting a little bit and learn a little more about the paint and a little more about the brushes, or try a little bit of a different style. A lot of my students are working a little more with wet into wet paint than they have in the past, and so on, different subjects. And so the more of this kind of work that you do, the more quickly you advance in your skills. I'm going to tell you some things you probably already know, and maybe some things that you don't know yet, or that you don't realize the importance of. But the first one has to do with pigment. And not everyone knows that all painting mediums are made with the same pigment. They all start with that. Now, we're not talking about the artificial ones, the ones that are hues, they're substitute colors, the student colors. We're not talking about that. But if it says on it that it is burnt sienna, then it means that it is an earth of some kind, and it is related chemically to a color that has been dug up in a town called Siena in Italy, but it is also found in other places in the world. But then there are other colors that are called burnt sienna hue, and those are made chemically. And they are not, now they may look the same, but they will not behave the same. Because if one is an earth and the other is a chemical, then they're going to behave differently. And so you need to understand that this is sometimes why you're having problems, because you're using colors, paints that are not compatible. And you may not know that. And when they tell you when you go into your first painting class that you should use artist colors, you don't want to pay the price. You don't want to pay that price. But the fact is, Leonard, you know this as well as anybody, that if you buy cheap paint,
you'll get cheap results.
You're going to get cheap results. Yeah, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have trouble with it. You're not going to be able to get consistency and good mixtures and so on. And so a lot of times you're blaming yourself for bad results when it's because you're not willing to push yourself into a higher level of materials. So I'm not going to show all this, but this is just to point out to you that this is the key. This is the key to everything, is pigment, and it should be artist colors. It doesn't matter the brand. There are a lot of, some artist brands are better made than others, or they're made differently with the different mixtures. You might not like the ones that have honey. Some people feel they're sticky and they ooze and things like that. So that's what you need to know. That's what you need to find out. Hopefully, if you're taking classes, your teachers will tell you those kinds of things. But the thing that you can learn the most ways of doing that, and since we have watercolor, it's really easy. You just wet a piece of paper and start throwing paint at it. But if you want to really make paint work for you, then what you need to have is a plan. And so your plan is, what do you want to know right now? The first thing I want my students to know is which colors are transparent and which ones are opaque. That's the very first thing. And so there are tests that you can do. Make charts with ink and paint over them and so on. And all these are things that I have put into my books, and eventually into the book. The new book is called Exploring Color Workshop, because it's in that kind of a format. It's organized like you would be going into a class and you would be learning about this thing this week and this thing next week. And it's not about painting a house this week and painting a boat next week. It's about your materials, and what you use to paint them with is up to you, what's in your heart and soul that you want to paint. But the way you paint with them, it's fun to play with watercolor, and I will show you some of the things that I've done. But while you're doing this, I urge you to make a master color chart. So when you're working with the artist's colors, if you will make a record of the colors that you've done, and this is a chart that's in 3 of my books that shows the colors that I've used in the illustrations in that book. And now, not the ones other people have done, of course, and not always the paintings, but for the painting exercises and the color mixing exercises. And then the important thing that goes on this chart is the actual name of the color, but the pigment number, which is, in this case, this is French ultramarine, And where are you? PB 29, I'm pretty sure. Might be PB 20. Oh, I can't find it. Wrong glasses. I took. No, they aren't. Now, really, I can't read with my reading glasses. Okay. Well, it might be on this one. This is a bigger tube. Anybody know what that one is? Oh, it's on my chart. PB 29. I was right. Okay. We didn't have that. We didn't have those numbers for a long time. And I'll tell you a little story. Do you remember Marilyn Hart? How many of you remember Marilyn Hart? Marilyn was very active in WOWs, and she was a very active painter. And she loved to go to workshops. She painted all the time, practice, practice, practice. And she came to me one day in class and said, I'm taking a workshop from somebody, and he wants me to get Windsor Red. And I said, well, that's a good color. And she said, I have so many reds. She carried her stuff in a carpenter's box. She had so much paint. She carried this huge hundreds of tubes in it. And she had so many reds, she didn't want to buy another red. I said, all right. I said, go bring me all your reds. And she brought me all the reds, and she did indeed have a ton of reds. And I said, okay, let me sort through these. And I started sorting through them. And when I had finished sorting through them, I had a little pile right here of 6.
Sharon, I'm in a meeting right now. Can I call you back
6254, PR 254, PR 254. They all had a different name, 6 different brands. She already had 6 versions of PR 254. One was called Windsor Red, one was called Grumbacher Red, one was called, and so on and so on. In other words, it's one of those that every manufacturer had given its own name to, because it wasn't a natural pigment, but it was the same genuine pigment. So she already had it. Well, so she was carrying around tons of duplications of colors that she didn't need, and she had spent money on all those tubes. So this is where a chart like this is handy. And then, you can make a sample and take it to the paint shop and ask them to put a smear on your chart, and then you can get the number of that if that's the color that you want, and you can always get the same color until you find one you like more. But that's what it's about, is you choosing your own colors and then knowing what you got. It's oh, you've been caught with that one, remembering what you did. Yeah. Well, okay. I have to say, this is my way. You have to understand that too, because not everybody wants to do all the stuff that I do. If you just want to paint, just play. There's nothing. I call this play. This is my play. But at the same time, when I see students struggling, trying to get a certain effect or trying to get a certain mixture, and they're using colors that won't work because they've got the wrong idea in their head, because blue and yellow doesn't always make green. It depends on which blue and which yellow, and which green you're trying to make, and so on. So if you build a foundation of knowledge about the colors, then you can repeat your success when you get a color and make it work, and you can repeat it. Okay, so one of the things you want to know is what do colors have in common. Now, this was in one of the books that I had that dated in the 1920s about these characteristics of paint, and that he said, divide all of your colors into these groupings. The colors that are very delicate and transparent, the colors that are very heavy and opaque, the colors that are bright and colorful, the colors that are weak, the ones that stain, the ones that granulate. Find out what they have in common with other colors. Put the colors that have these things in common. And so I reduced this down to this grouping. And then a few years later, not so very long ago, I added a new one because there had been some new colors. And I call it the modern the modern intense, the modern earth, the modern delicate, and so on. What I found when I taught my very first color workshop, everybody did these tests. I made them do all these things, test the transparency. They had to do it in class. And I'd see eye rolls all over the place. And I said, well, this is it, you know, you got to get hands-on with this stuff. But that very first class that I had probably about 25 students at Riverbend in the summer. It was their very first workshop. And so on the last day, I said, what we're going to do is you pick the colors that you like the best, but you can only have 8 on your palette. I'm only going to let you have 8 or 9, but you pick the ones that you like. So I gave them, you know, you should have a red, a yellow, and a blue, and then, you know, we go from there. You don't need a black because you can mix it, and so on. And so with that, I came up with a compatible color circles. And then this is the delicate group. You see how light they are. And then these are stronger. These are the 3 that I learned to paint with. These are much more intense. These are the staining colors. Now these are all earth colors. So these are granulating and very opaque. These are more standard. I call this the old Masters palette because it's like a lot of the old brownish colored. Now some of those may have changed through the years as if the pigments changed, but generally this is the look. And then this is the very intense modern colors. Bright, I call that the bright earth. I had to make some stuff up. So if you don't like my names, you can change the names. There's no rule about that. Okay. Now, now I've got a few tips as I move towards the ending of this now. And what I'm talking about here, I think, is there anybody in the group here tonight who's a beginner?
Who's what?
A beginner, a beginning painter? Okay, how much painting have you done?
I painted in high school and I haven't painted since.
Oh, is she in for some fun? Don't let this scare you. Seriously, have fun. I mean, that's the main thing, but practice. Okay, all right. So what I've tried to illustrate here is there's more than one way to mix your colors, and the students that I have in my present class, I've got several that are new to me, who are sort of intermediate painters, but they haven't got a foundation of knowledge yet, and so a lot of members of the class know all this stuff already. But the thing is, if their painting comes out dull, sometimes it's because they've mixed their paint too much. They've overmixed it. And so you can mix it on the palette and pick it up and drop it on the paper, or you can mix it on wet paper, or you could drop it in and rock the paper and let it mingle, let gravity move it. So there are a lot of different ways to use your body when you're involved in this, and instead of standing over it and letting your hands shake like this when you're trying to do it. And remember, gravity. So tilt. Well, this is what. Tilt your board, and then here's an example. This is all from the same colors on the palette, and this is overlapping them. This is going quickly without reloading it. This is thick paint. This is dropping the color onto wet paint. A little paint mixture and a lot. So you learn to you're the one that's in control. You're in control of how much water and how much paint. And so if you're not getting the results, then they're consistent results, then you need to figure out and ask your teacher, or go to the library, because there's some very good books in the library, and find out what you need to do to improve your mixtures. So now these are just play that I've done that I use as samples in my classes. This is for controlling the paint vertically, wetting it, holding it vertically, and then just running the colors down. I don't really remember which way I did it. It looks to me like I did it this way, but I might have done it this way. I'm not sure anymore. Now, this is kind of crazy, but I did this. This is actually on one of my videos, I think, that Northlight did. I painted my self-portrait. So the lesson here is you can use every color if you want to. You don't have to mix them, and it doesn't have to be real. It can be fun. The idea is you got to have fun. I mean, I think so anyway. So my other methods of teaching these various color things. Okay, first thing is how you're going to set up your palette. Okay, so you can have your color on opposite sides, or you can run it around depending on what kind of a palette you have. This is what I call split complements. I'm going to show you a little more of that in a minute. Oh, and I want to tell you about the little palettes, the little cutouts, templates. They're free. I had those made years ago. None of the information, address information, is any good, so don't try to contact me. But you can have those if you haven't already got one. So anyway, you set up your palette to suit yourself, and I've got two different ones here that I think are useful. This was the most popular, and I think they're still available, but I'm not really sure. It's called the John Pike palette. This is the second palette I ever bought. I'm still using it. It's still my main palette. It has 20-some colors on it. Some of them have been on there for years, but most of them, of course, every time I use it, I replace it. One thing to remember, if you haven't had anyone told you this before, is that if you leave your paints to dry and pick up the color, you won't get as much color. So I suggest that once you decide what you're going to paint and how many colors you're going to use, you only put those colors. You can refresh on these, or you can use a plain palette like this. So, but what I do here is I usually take the colors from here and mix them over here. Before I start to paint, I refresh the colors I'm going to use, or I use a completely clean palette. But one thing that I did make a mistake on after using this palette for 20-some years, I decided I wanted cobalt blue here instead of ultramarine blue, because ultramarine blue was here, because that's where Mr. Krieger had it on his palette. And over here was burnt sienna. And I decided when I was cleaning my palette, those many years ago, that I would move that in this. And I still go to those places. I go there for, it's cobalt now, but if I want ultramarine, I find myself going to the wrong place. That's how habit gets formed. Okay. Now I'm almost finished talking, so, this also. I found these palettes. The last I looked, they were still available at the Speedball Company. And when I show you my split primaries, you'll understand why I do this. Now, as I was studying my colors, one of the things that I noticed, there were two specific dominant arrangements of this triad, what I call triads. And one has red over here and one has blue over here, and then they both have yellow up here. So then I started looking at every palette to see in every book that I had, and I've got hundreds. And I found that some people don't try to orient their palettes at all to make any sense out of them. And it's like I'm saying about the blues here that I switched, you should know exactly where your colors, where does your brush want to go to make that color. If you'd always find that, always the yellow's at the top. So I just say yellow is true north. Yellow is true north on your palette. And then everything else is related to that. Now, some books flip it. If you prefer that, there's nothing wrong with that. If you keep it consistent. But you can't switch on another palette and go back and forth between the two palettes because there's a lot of body memory that goes in with your painting. The more you paint, the more consistent you are about the way you do things, what you like to do, the way it feels good to you, and so on. So that's what you want to watch. So you'd have, this would be different. This is what I'm looking at right here, right down here. This is, some of these are illustrations from my books. Oh, yes, I remember now what I wanted to tell you about this. I don't think there's as much of an argument about this as there used to be. Everybody relaxes a lot about when they say what the rules are of colors, rules are of paint, and so on. And, you know, nobody seems to like rules very much anymore. But red, yellow, and blue, the primaries go back to the 1600s. And there are, you know, pamphlets and so on that have been written about that. But there are also some that are different that talk about magenta, yellow, and cyan. Now, magenta, yellow, and cyan, it turns out that these three are what we call the normal pigment primaries. These three are I call them the modern colors, the modern pigments. They used to use a lot of the matters and things like that, but the matter colors were not very good. But nowadays, we have better materials to make paints out of, and there are a few good substitute colors. So I've tested colors for several manufacturers, and I've tried light fastness and all these different things. And one of the things that I found with one printer was that they had people who couldn't get good mixtures with their blues and reds. And it was because they were using this palette right here. And they said, well, it's red, yellow, blue. I mean, that's a basic palette. It shouldn't be any conflict. But the problem is that the printers use ink. And they use magenta, yellow, and cyan. Those are their primaries. And so when the printer was complaining to me when I first started to use him, when I was having some prints made, and he said he had people that would complain about, you know, they wouldn't use the right colors. And I said, well, what you need to do before you ever sign the contract is tell them what colors will give them the best color. And they don't know that. That isn't something anybody teaches them. They use what their teachers use, and that could be anything. And some people can get good results from almost anything. I mean, it's not like there is one way to do this. There's your way and there's everybody else's way. So if your way isn't working, then find somebody who's getting results like you want and ask them how they do that. Because it's only in just your choices of materials, or it might be the paper. And I've got one very good painter in my class right now who's been painting for years and years. She does very well, but she gets really put off when she's not getting good results, and it's because she experiments with papers. And she gets free papers or tries a sample or something like that, and some of the papers have a creamy cast to it that affects the color of the paint when you put it down, because it's transparent. What part of transparent don't you understand? Okay, but that's what I told him. I said, just all you have to do is tell him, stop using ultramarine, stop using cadmium yellow, and use lemon yellow, and phthalo blue if you want to make a bright green in your print. It's as easy as that. And there's a whole laundry list of reasons why that's true, but you can find it in any of my books. It's one of the easiest things that you can do, if you know that information. Okay, I think I'm running out of time. What's my time limit here? 8 o'clock? Okay. Okay, well, I'm just about done. I'm sorry I'm not doing a painting for you, but honestly, no, I'm not. Well, I may as well be honest. You know, at my age, how many more chances do I have left to tell people what I really believe? So that's what I'm doing. Okay, so, but here's the secret. Here's the secret right here. Split primaries. Split yellow, split red, split blue. With a line between. Okay? You don't go outside the lines when you mix this if you want to get orange, because this is what will happen. Can you see the difference? Now, you may not be able to because the light isn't real good here, but if you had good light on this has got a grayish cast to it. It's not bright orange.
What did you say caused that? What did you say caused that?
Well, what causes that is that this yellow has no blue in it. This red has no blue in it. There's just red and yellow. This one I went across the line. There's a greenish yellow, and it's the greenish yellow that makes this get muddy, or the bluish red. So when the complement is in the mixture. Now, I'll give you something else. I have a website, and I have, on my website, I have these charts. So go to NitaLeland.com, and there is a main page that has, I forget what the divisions are called. There are two that have lessons in, sections that have lessons. And this chart is in, and there are color mixing lessons and various alphabet things about color, and lots of information. And I also have on my YouTube page, I have a free watercolor course that was based on my first video, my first public video, that when it came, they stopped using it. They said I could do what I wanted to with it, and so my son took it apart and broke it down into 8 watercolor lessons called Watercolor for the Terrified. So for free, you can go there and you can see me actually painting and doing these things. All right, so here is all right, more play. This is how I play with colors. I wanted to play with how many different kinds of portrait colors could I come up with that I have on my palette that I like, that I could use for portraits. I take my pick. I don't use them all. But I use, I might pick one of these for shadows, I might pick one of these for the cheeks, for skin colors, light and dark. You can use these with the blues, and so on. Here's something I call painting glow. I think I may have that on my website. That's the funny thing. I've never written a watercolor book. My publisher wanted me to turn my color book into a watercolor book, and he went to China to visit his son, and I took all the watercolor stuff out. And it has, my illustrations are in watercolor, but I did not want to do, there were so many, I did not want to do a watercolor instruction book. Nobody had a color book. And by the way, my first book was the first book ever published by this publisher, and I think by any other that I've never seen prior to the date of mine, in full color. Because up until 1985, when that book came out, everybody was doing a little section with 5 color pages, and then the rest of it is black and white. Okay, so I teach how to play with color. So I have a little group of colors that I use for that kind of play. And then this is where I'm using color schemes to paint the 4 seasons. So to me, the secret to learning about color is using as few colors as you can use to get the effect that you want. If you're reaching and reaching and reaching and reaching for different colors, you haven't got the right colors in your palette yet. You should, by practice and by different experiments. What do we have up here? Put this over. All right, so this is what I was just talking about, crossing the lines. So now this illustrates it pretty clearly. This is the normal split primary chart, triads. Okay? Now look what happens when I flip. I'm going to switch these and these. Now look at the mixtures on this color wheel. You see how it all went muddy? And it's because the complement of the 2 colors you're using is in that mixture. Okay. And then, all right, so the little color wheel that you have over here is, I pass this out in my color classes, and you make the circles. You've got this one, the yellow, making sure you've got the colors at the top and the bottom, and your yellows will be up here and so on. And as I say, this chart is in my website, and then you can do the same thing. And then the way I check them, in this particular one, this is comparisons of the qualities of the paint: delicacy, high key, low key, opacity, opaque, the old masters, what I call the bright earth. Now this was the last book, the workshop book. I had 2 new ones, 2 new colors, calling modern high intensity and modern low intensity down here. So those are in the new book. So I'm trying not to look at colors paint anymore. I don't want to do any more charts. Okay. Okay, now again, this is all play though, and I just said, one day, okay, I had a picture of some jugs of from Santa Fe, so I decided to try different ways of coloring them. So here it's all pure color. This is patterns. This is values, and this is abstraction. So that's another thing I like to do, is try different styles. This is what I'm doing with my class now. Would you say this sounds familiar when I show you these? Yeah, because I haven't, in the past I didn't usually take in too much stuff for my students to see, but I found that they get inspired when they see something that they haven't seen before and want to try it. So, okay, so then these 2 were based on the original books, although these are remakes. And these are different combinations of triad. This is a basic red, yellow, blue. And then these are different combinations of red, yellow, blue, or adding another color. Okay, so that's it. Another thing that I like to do is to show myself how many variations I can do. Using just 3 colors. And somebody in this room only uses 3 colors. I wouldn't want to mention any names. I don't know if it's public knowledge or not.
She's looking right at her.
No, I mean, you know this person. You could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it pretty much does it.
They really like 3 colors too.
She really? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, what I'm showing is not everybody likes the same 3 colors, see? So you don't have to use the same colors. If somebody says, I use these 3 colors, You say, well, you know what, I don't like that color over here. In fact, I had an argument with Mr. Krieger. I bought a piece of, a bottle, not bottle, tube of paint from Winsor & Newton, and it was supposed to be burnt umber, which was the color he used to make his browns and his grays. And it wasn't right. I could see it was burnt sienna, not burnt umber. They had the wrong label on it. And it was gorgeous. It was just what I'd been looking for. Oh, my colors were that I had tried to tone down with the burnt umber just went dead. So I went to Mr. Krieger and I said, look what happened. I got this tube and I told him what happened, and he said, well, send it back and make him give you a new one. Well, the only answer to that was I hid it so he wouldn't see me painting with it. I kept it and I still use it. Okay, so then this, this is all I could find in my, Leonard will appreciate this. Where do you think I got that background? Oh, come on. Nita Engel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nita Engel.
That's Engel.
Okay, Nita Engel. Wow's had a workshop with Nita Engel. And yeah, I took that long years ago. And one of the things that we did, she worked big, really, really big, but she showed us how to do these real splashy things. And the thing that I would do when I learned a new technique is just do a bunch of them. You know, throw them on the floor and do another bunch, throw them on the floor, you know, and then one by one, I put a subject on them, and then I go to a show and sell them. This is the only one I have left.
She was a good instructor.
This is an abstraction of, this is from Taos, I think. Taos, no, Albuquerque, the shop's in Albuquerque. These were hanging on a door. And so I abstracted them. I did a couple of, I don't know, 3 or 4 with this subject matter. Up here, I have added, because it went dull, and I couldn't think of any way to lighten it, so I used pastel. So you can add pastel to your watercolors when they're dry and bring the light back if you lose it. And then I had a workshop from, her name was Jean something. She had us do, like, go outside and bring in 3 things and make a painting of it. With this one, she said, take one object and repeat it and make a painting of it. So I took 1 bottle and 3 colors. Your favorites, actually. Yeah, yeah. What are you using for your red?
I'm using quinacridone magenta.
Yeah.
Quinacridone gold and phthalo blue. Those are the ones
Yeah.
I've always done.
Okay. Well, they didn't have those back in this day. But this would be alizarin,
Okay.
or it might be magenta. I don't know. But anyway, so that's an experiment because I like to experiment with those things. I ran out of things.
Now you're going to paint.
So when you experiment, what kind of paper are you using?
All right, my favorite paper for years was Arches. And then when I did one of my books, I decided to try another paper, and I tried Winsor & Newton, and I found out Winsor & Newton was whiter. And it had a very nice surface, and I liked the texture. So I used that mostly for my books, for my book illustrations. But it isn't enough. It doesn't really make that much difference because you don't know how they're gonna print it. You know, this last company that printed my last book, they improved it first. But the first printing of it, they didn't use enough ink. I didn't think. I felt. I mean, you know, they went bankrupt. I mean, what can I say? They didn't know what they were doing. So it didn't turn out the way I would have liked. And I didn't have that problem usually with Northlight. So
So when I go buy paper or like Kilimanjaro
Well,
or
Winsor
something,
Newton
but
and
they have white and then they have a cream. Do you prefer the white?
I
or
prefer the
cream?
white. Winsor and Newton Arches. Arches was the one I used for years and years and years and years and years. My house is full of paintings by me on Arches, and it's a very creamy one, but it's not enough to make any difference. I have used artist colors. The artist colors can hold their own pretty well, but I found out when I was trying to make people see colors more clearly or better, that it was better if I make my color samples out of the white papers, the Winsor & Newton. Now, it's really hard to get. New colors are coming up, papers and things are coming on all the time. I haven't seen any new papers that I would give you 50 cents for. What are you using now?
Arches.
Arches, yeah. Well, see, they're good paper. It's strong, it's solid, it doesn't change. When that's one thing I felt bad about with Mr. Krieger, because he used a paper that was 50-50, 50% rag, and it was not acid. It was not acid-free. And so all of those early exercises that I did, that I showed you here, have yellowed, and it's on there somewhere.
Fabriano is a good paper.
Fabriano is a very good paper, yes. Most of it is, and I worked with them for a while, most of it is a little too smooth for me. I like a little more texture. So that's something else that you will notice, is that the texture is different on every paper. And some you like and some you don't. And some, if they're not properly sized, they soak up the paint so fast that it gets dull. Would you agree?
Yes.
It gets watery looking or something. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and leaves brush marks and all that kind of stuff. So it's okay to experiment, but the best thing you can do is, like, if you're taking classes from somebody in class brings something in and you like the look of it, your fellow students, I've never ever had anybody say in a class, "That's my secret." I mean, they share, and they're very flattered when you point out something that they're doing that you like, and so that's a good thing to do. Good questions. Any other questions? Okay, well, I think I am going to stop. You're welcome to come up and look at the items here on the table, and you're welcome to look at the books, and I have a $5 discount on each book if you wish to buy one, and I take only cash and checks. And all the information's on that table, and I will sign them for you if you like. Any questions?
What do you think,
Thank you.
what do you